Welcome back. Hope you all had a nice break. We're going to start our next series of speakers. And I am very excited to introduce to you one of our own, Dr. Rebecca Duncan, originally from Ohio, teaches British literature and professional writing here at Meredith. She has studied in Brazil, taught in Bolivia, and has lived in at least 6 states in the United States. Her research interests range from Virginia Woolf to digital identity and culture. We want to welcome Dr. Rebecca Duncan.
Thank you. Hello. I am doing a little fireside chat here without the fire. You'll have to imagine the fire. I'm speaking on sustainability and a sense of place, contemplations on home. How can we engage our students, friends, and neighbors to contemplate sustainability? I suggest that we bring the topic home, to that most sacred space where identity begins to form, that place we return to physically and symbolically for most of our lives, and measure against it the people we have become. Place and home are recurrent literary themes. From classical times to the present day, the impact of the heroic quest is felt only when the hero returns home. Domesticity defines and assesses the female character throughout the history of the novel. Men go, women stay. Beware the women who want to go, and heaven help the ones who do. By the 20th century, women are going too, though, and characters like Dee in Alice Walker's story Everyday Use ramp up the intensity of the interpersonal and cultural conflict between those who wander and those who remain anchored to home. Newly influenced by the Black Power movement of the late 1960s, Dee assumes an African name, and she has rejected a heritage that she thinks represents oppression, and her new self can hardly be contained in her family's rural homestead. Home. The word itself is a poet's dream, or at least a very handy tool. Its rounded O lands softly on a motherly M. Home is the maternal, ever welcoming its children. Gerard Manley Hopkins exploits the connotative strength of the word in his poem A Candle Indoors. Come you indoors, come home, your fading fire men first, and vital candle in close heart's vault. You there are master, do your own desire. Poetry like this, and other literary genres, fiction and drama, offer us sensory evidence that is first felt and then thought. Reflection and critical distance take us from literary notions of home to the concept of homeland, the space defined by geographer Yi Fu Tuan as a region, city, or countryside large enough to support a people's livelihood. Homeland, thus defined, suggests responsibility towards oneself and one's family, and from a sustainability perspective, a responsibility to care for the place as we draw upon its resources for our survival, our well-being, and our success. Homeland implies community too, and with it, the corollary that the space and its riches are shared. Competing interests and ensuing conflicts will prompt divergent definitions of home among the rivals. Yet at some scale, the notion of homeland affords an opportunity for harmony and collaboration. I'd like to share with you an essay that draws upon the sensory to spur reflection and analysis. It's about my homeland. It's called Thinking Ohio from Here. It was published in the Huffington Post last weekend, by the way. So, Google Ohio, fracking, and map, and you'll get a drawing of the Buckeye State overlaid with digital pushpins that mark where the trucks are lumbering in with concrete and piping, bands of structural steel, and garage-sized compressors. Forests and pastures are giving way to massive drilling pads where millions of tons of water will accelerate the slow natural process by which oil and natural gas emerge from the brittle rock. Most of the pins on this map run north and south, parallel to the Pennsylvania border. They mark permits issued for drilling of the Utica and Devonite shale beds, which some say is the key to our country's energy independence. A thick cluster of pinpoints runs from Akron to Marietta, while a few outliers dot the landscape of my home, a rural crossroads turned suburb called Howland Township. The first well in my county is under construction. It would be easy to become emotional about this. No matter how much we change, we want home to stay the same. That line of pins, the shale line, also marks the road I took to my grandmother's house and later to Ohio University. The well under construction lies just a few miles from Camp Sugarbush, where I learned to sleep in a tent in the woods, steer a canoe, and make Thousand Island dressing from scratch. My family has been gone from the region for 2 decades, but many friends and memories remain there, and so do our dead. In the areas where the shale drilling has begun, people speak of tainted water, noise and light-disrupted sleep, and various other health hazards. One would imagine that those numerous earthquakes centered in nearby Youngstown might be difficult to ignore. And yet advocates can be found among the landowners, the business leaders, state and local government officials. Even some of the most vocal opponents have been swayed by the promise of a new source of income. From my new home in North Carolina, I juggle sentiment and concern with reason and try to keep an open mind. I read my hometown newspaper online and learn that all boats are floating higher on the wave of this industry: housing, retail, suppliers, processing plants, and pipelines. Senator Rob Portman dropped in recently to decry federal regulation and predict 200,000 new jobs to harvest what he calls the energy in the ground here in Ohio. 2 Ohio State University engineering students with ties to the area have formed a networking group with sites aimed at the extraction industry. One of them gushes, "I believe that this shale is one of the most encouraging developments to hit the Youngstown area since the steel industry of the past." The past that this student speaks of is the one that nurtured my happy memories of home. The steel industry was very, very good to my family and the families of my classmates. Republic Steel chose my father to be its first computer programmer. We grew up using old punch cards for a grocery list. My brothers and I enjoyed music lessons, water skiing on Mosquito Lake, shopping trips to Cleveland's finest stores, and my dad's whimsical Sunday outings. We even saw Niagara Falls with the water turned off. Where steel reigned, those sturdy and sexy American cars also rolled off the assembly lines. On weekends, our Mustangs, Camaros, and Grand Ams encircled the McDonald's, whose manager clung stubbornly to that old yellow arch design. We ran our engines on cheap gas and ate burgers and fries in our cars. My older brother could labor in the mill from Memorial Day to Labor Day and plunk down a check for a worry-free year of college tuition and fun. Those who stayed behind joined their fathers and grandfathers in union jobs that demanded hard work but put food on the table and then some. At worst, a new machine knocked some workers down the pay scale, and pink soot from the blast furnace dusted the windshields of our cars. But no one imagined that those days of prosperity would ever end. Growing up in the 1990s, though, these shale-ambitious students would have seen much less optimism and many more cold factories and shuttered storefronts. I wonder if they learned the subtle variations among each of the mom-and-pop pizza sauces that flavored my youth, or if by then it was Domino's and Pizza Hut all the way. Did their older kinfolk convey to them the sensory feast of heat and force and pounding rhythm that transformed raw ore into the sleek shapes and mighty pillars girding 20th century life? I hope so. It had given these young men distance from the pulse of the life I knew. Who can blame them for acting on a different vision for the future? In the summer of 2011, my son and I made a college visit to Cleveland and Pittsburgh. As we sliced through my corner of Ohio, he asked if we might see an Amish community. His timing was perfect. I made a quick U-turn and within minutes we arrived in Mesopotamia, my grandfather's birthplace, on the night of the annual Oxford Festival. Our family kept a country cottage nearby, so I knew the roads well. My son would later tell his friends that we had been to the Amish State Fair. I was thrilled to introduce to him the square black buggies, the people's modest dress, the clean white houses nestled among fields of corn and wheat. A few rumspringers tinkered with cell phones and waved from the back seats of cars, but for the most part things looked like they always had. That line of pushpins, with its ensuing promise of jobs, noise, fuel, illness, prosperity, and devastation of nature, you decide, is marching northward in these earth-loving people's direction. I'm so glad we passed through when we did. Thank you.